how's it going, everybody? Welcome to the second episode of Kevin Off Key, the official podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Rich, and with me we have our actual first guest today on the podcast, and let me introduce you. Her name is Mia.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I am Mia. Nice to meet you.
That she is. So today we're going to talk about a topic about what it means to be a musician. So today with me, I actually have 5 questions I want to ask about this topic, and we're also going to go into more in-depth experiences, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So let's get right into it. First, Mia, what does it mean to be a musician to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I feel like what it means to be a musician is it's kind of one of those subjective terms. It's not quite like there's a hard and fast label on it.
Right.
If you talk to one person, they're gonna say being a musician means you have to fit criteria X, Y, and Z.
Right.
To me personally, I feel like being a musician really just means that music is like an extension of yourself, and it is something that you use as a way to express yourself. I also feel like being a musician is something that you have to take and you have to claim yourself, because honestly, being a musician, that isn't a label somebody else can give you. It might feel like you want to, seek that validation of somebody else telling you that you are a musician, but just like with anything, you have to take that in first and be like, yes, I am a musician. I also feel like you truly cross the threshold of being a musician when you're going to put time and energy into making your music better or your craft better, whether that's how you sing, how you drum, etc. And that's kind of what will differentiate you from somebody who, just sings in their car just for fun. They're not doing it. It's not part of their identity. So I think, honestly, to boil it down, what it means to be a musician is when it is a part of you and it's an identity.
Yeah. Well, good. I like that. I really like that answer. So the next thing I want to ask you is, what kind of inspired you to become a musician in the first place?
Yeah, so growing up, I kind of had a tumultuous childhood, and I kind of found respite in 2 different things, kind of the academic world, but then most importantly was music. So music was something that I could feel all of these emotions, and I could express myself in a way that I wasn't able to otherwise.
Right.
So, growing up, I moved like 40 different times. I went to 15 different schools, and there's no way to have a constant in that life. I never had a constant home or a constant parent because I was bouncing between the 2. But the one thing that I did have constant was music.
Right.
And so that really is what inspired me, was to share myself and to express myself in a way that I knew I could do universally.
That's good. I love that. So the next thing I want to ask you is, how does being a musician actually affect your everyday life?
Yeah, so I think just if we're talking about some of the everyday happenstances, I would say the way it affects me is I will find myself very often, just constantly having a song going through my head, or maybe I will have a very powerful emotion and all of a sudden I'll start just writing a song in my head. Of course, I never remember them, even though they're the greatest thing I ever write in that moment. And then, yeah, it's normally right before I go to bed, and I'm like, oh, that's great, that's gold. I'm gonna remember that tomorrow morning. Nope, never remember it. But I would say that it definitely shapes how I interact with the world. I constantly will just sing sentences when I'm out at the grocery store or shopping. I'm always snapping away, and I can't go a single trip without some sort of music on, some sort of background music. And I also think that it's affected me in the way that I always want to try new instruments. So I sing. That's my primary thing that I do. That's where I would say, where that's what I go back to.
Exactly.
I also love to fiddle around like on the piano. I've given my hand at playing some just like random violin. So I've fiddled around with like a guitar and drums, but I think that's part of that. When you're a musician, you get really interested and inspired by lots of normal everyday things.
Right.
So
it's like a whole new world opens up whenever you get all of these new potential instruments that you can just dive yourself into.
yeah, definitely.
So another thing I want to ask is, what are some struggles you faced while being a musician?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think that one of the biggest struggles that I have faced has been a lack of confidence.
Right.
When I was younger, being a musician and singing, that was something that I took pride in. Lots of people told me that I was really good at it, and so, I was easily able to have that confidence.
Yeah.
And then, I had one particular instance where I had an uncle who was having a bad day, and, he just told me, he was like, you sound terrible. And because that was told to me when I was like 13, that was such a formative time, and that was when I was really starting to like sing all the time and express myself. It really stuck with me. And so like I found myself like hearing what he said in myself instead of having that confidence. And then of course going into high school, girls are super catty, but I was always in like a cappella choir, which was the highest choir to be in our high school. I wasn't in like the jazz choir, and I didn't do like plays or anything because I was in other things, like I was in cheerleading and stuff. But I also found that, I would make friends with a girl, and, I'd go spend the night at her house, and then I'd hear, oh, she thinks that you're too nasally or too this. And so like over time, those little things start to wear on you. And it's just, that's one of the biggest struggles that I've had to constantly face, is confidence has been the lack of confidence, and being self-conscious has been the root of all of the other experiences that I've found that have made things difficult for me, so like stage fright, I've had to deal with that because I went to college, and you'd think this would be validation, like I got a scholarship for singing,
right.
So you think that I would have been like, wow, okay, yeah, like my literal college recognizes that I sing well, okay,
right.
But no, that, it's that's kind of like goes back to where you have to claim that for yourself. But we had to do like a performative piece on stage, and I was just scared to death. And we also had to sing in front of classes and stuff like that, and so I dealt with a lot of stage fright. And even now, I've done karaoke just a handful of times because I'm just terrified. I'm like, oh God, I'm going to get in there and everybody's going to boo me off the stage. Even though the first time I did karaoke, I had people coming up and being like, wow, that was so good. And I'm like, you're lying to me. Good. So I think that like inner saboteur, that like that part of me that sabotages myself because of that self-confidence.
Right.
And I am hyper vigilant, a lot because of my childhood. So whenever I'm singing for a person, I'll notice their body language. Like,
right.
Exactly. Are they paying attention? Did they twitch? Did they do this or do that? And instead of just being like, wow, maybe they're itchy, or maybe they're just thinking about something else, I'm like, oh God, they think I sound terrible. So I think that's one of the biggest struggles that I am consistently working through. And I will probably work through, hopefully, and get past. But
yeah.
I'm not quite past there yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
You'll get there. You'll definitely get there. It's a journey. One thing I do want to make clear too is that's a whole topic of itself, lack of confidence and just struggles of a musician. So in the future, we're also going to dive into some of those topics as well a little bit more. We just wanted to kind of scratch the surface a little bit of this. So another question I wanted to ask you, Mia, is do you have any experience that sticks out to you that kind of helps shape who you are as a musician?
Yeah. So actually, it's kind of adjacent to the last question you would ask me.
Fright.
Yeah. So part of the scholarship was like requirements for you to hold that up for all 4 years. Because I went to a 4-year college. You had to do vocal lessons, and then you had to do like these vocal showcases, I think would be the best way to describe it.
Right.
And so you'd typically be in this room, this like smaller auditorium room. I don't know, it was like maybe had 20, 30 other students that these vocal coaches were working with other people. And when I had worked with my vocal coach, the very first time she came in, she was like, okay, let's test your range, let's test your pitch, let's do all this. And I remember she told me like, wow, you have such a powerful instrument. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like that was such a profound compliment for me. And again, that was one of those things that I heard somebody else say, but I wasn't able to absorb. So anyways, it came time where we had to perform, and I was performing the song Black is the Color of My True Love's Hair, I remember. And I was so nervous because I had taken a break from college and I had come back. So I was like the oldest one in the class, and I hadn't been singing again for too long. Right. And it was my turn, and I was shaking and so scared, so my breath support gone. And I was like, Black! Yeah, and I was offbeat, and I was probably pitchy as all heck. And I remember finishing, and I could tell that everybody in the audience didn't know what to say, because then we received criticism, and constructive criticism. People would raise their hand, they'd say this and that. I got a lot of people being like, wow, I can really tell you're nervous, like, try to do this, try to do that. And I felt so defeated. But after the class, my vocal coach came up to me and she was like, I don't know who that was, but she was like, because that's not how you normally are or sound. Right. So we're going to work on this a little bit more. I want you to come one extra time this week. And then next weekend, you're going to do it again. So I did it again, and I blew them all out of the water. They were all like, wow, I can't believe you were literally the same human being that was just here last week. Like, your tone was beautiful. They said all of these wonderful things that was just so great. And my wife was she came there that time with me because I was so nervous that I wanted her to watch me. And she was like, you moved me to tears, yada, yada. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. But that experience of not necessarily the criticism or doing it well, but the experience of seeing that you can do something and not do it well, maybe like have a failure, so to speak, and then you can try it again, and you're not stuck to what you were once pinned as. Like, you're not always going to be pinned. Like, people are willing to give you a second chance, and you have to give yourself a second chance. And if you just work a little bit and you get over those nerves, like, you're able to really move forward. So like, that shaped me as a musician, and it stuck with me, because now, instead of feeling like I have to have complete perfection, take one, I know that I can take my time, I can learn, I can do multiple takes. And I think that's another thing as well, is like the industry, they really tell you, like, or they don't tell you, it's kind of that implicit message that everything's just perfect right off of the bat. People are writing, I wrote an album in one night, and here's my 15 songs, I went into the booth and I killed it, and you're like, okay, that's what I have to do to be a musician. And then you realize that that's not true, and you realize, like, for example, exactly, also too, like, for example, if we want to talk about artists like Monet, he didn't paint his famous 3 huge canvases of lily pads in one night. He didn't do it in one day, in 1 month, like, it took him a long time, or whatever. Whatever other great artists you want to talk about, they actually there is more to it than maybe what they're saying. Maybe they're trying to downplay that to make themselves feel better. But I think just be realistic that it does take time. So, yeah.
And I want to point out another thing too. You became resilient. You were able to face the fact that it wasn't exactly what you pictured in your head, and you were able to come back, train, get better, and blow them out of the water. And that just shows perseverance and resilience, and that's amazing.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
No problem. Another thing I also want to mention too, like with I have an experience myself. It's actually kind of funny because I can't even remember like how the hell I was a musician before then. But I used to be in this band and I was a frontman. It was the first time I ever decided to, put myself out there and kind of just really step up to the plate and try to do something I wasn't really super solid and comfortable with and everything, but I wanted to grow and I wanted to learn. I remember I had a huge timing problem. I always would get offbeat. I'd always get so nervous. I would end up everyone else in the band would perform exceptionally well, except me sometimes. And then I remember there was a time where like I surprised myself by staying up more on time than not, but it still wasn't satisfactory to me. So flash forward, after that, I ended up putting pen to paper, opening up my laptop, got a metronome, started practicing, and now I record almost every single day, and I've recorded over 70 songs. And I'm not saying like I'm a amazing talented musician or anything.
Oh, stop, you are.
I will say that I definitely have improved on a timing issue aspect, and I think that is one of the single things that have shaped me as a musician. And I had to fail to learn how to get better. Sometimes you have to fail to become better, and that's one of the biggest things that I think I learned as a musician. So yeah, I just also wanted to share that and everything too.
Yeah, I think that was a great thing to share because it's just another example, like you said. Yeah, the resilience and at the heart of being a musician, kind of going back to that very first question, is you do have to be resilient. You know, like you kind of have to grow a thicker skin, and you have to grow that self-confidence and be resilient, because your music isn't going to be everybody's cup of tea.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to like it, but music is subjective anyways.
Yep, and some people are going to love it.
Yeah. So a little change of subject here. I want to talk a little bit about promo section. We're going to give Mia the floor, and she's going to actually be able to talk about any upcoming projects or things she's working on. So, Mia.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So on the musician front, I'm still kind of working to get my footing on any type of releases, so I don't have anything for you to stay tuned for that. However, I do also do photography, which is Silver Iris Photography. You can find me on Facebook or on Instagram. I'm working on a website, but you can also find me on Unscripted. And honestly, I love shooting, whether you need headshots or whether you need a music video taken, or if you want cover art, anything like that. I would love to be part of any musician's creative process of getting their selves out there. If they need any help with, stylized shots or brandings or anything like that. So again, Silver Iris Photography, and I'm Mia. I'd be your photographer.
Yeah, and trust me, she does very good work. She she was the videographer and basically directed my music video for Stay Afloat. So check that out, and also be sure to check out Silver Iris Photography. And where can I find it again?
Facebook, Instagram, or Unscripted. Yeah.
Alright, you heard it here, folks. Alright, so finally, we're about to close out here, but first I want to ask you one more thing. Do you have any advice you'd like to give to the listeners listening on this podcast today?
Yeah, definitely. I honestly think the biggest piece of advice that I could give is be yourself.
Yeah.
Like, truly, be yourself. There is so much in this world so many different influences telling you how to look, how to dress, how to sound, how to do this, how to do that. But at the end of the day, there's nobody as unique as you. And claim your own voice and really just truly be yourself and be okay knowing that you're gonna have to be resilient. I kind of think that would be almost like the theme of the episode is resilience. So yeah, that'd be my advice.
Yeah, and it's very good advice. I completely agree with that. So, all right, we're going to close out, guys. Thank you all for listening to our podcast. And one thing I want to do is give a huge thank you to Mia for coming on to my podcast. And thank you for helping with just even everything, even setting up and just working through the kinks with me. So,
of course. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I'm so honored. It was a pleasure. I had so much fun. Anybody who wants to be on Kevin Off Key really should do it because it was just a great time. I felt like just so comfortable. This was just such a great safe space, and honestly, you wouldn't regret being a guest.
And remember, everyone, this podcast is going to be a safe space for all musicians, music listeners, people who even work in the music industry or anything. So this is inclusive to everybody, and I just want you all to have a good day. Stay kind, stay respectful, and be resilient. If you want to find out what the other side of music sounds like, make sure to check out Kevin Off Key, the official podcast. Bye.
Bye.